The envelope had 2 stamps, pressed on crooked, and the address written in pencil by a child's hand. Kang Min-jae opened it with his father's letter opener. A photograph slid onto the desk, face down. On the white back, 6 words in capital letters. He turns 7 tomorrow. He turned it over. A boy, a cake with 6 candles, a paper crown, crooked, and the eyes, his own eyes, looking back at him from a face he had never seen. Caroline Hayes was 4 kilometers away, hammering a tent stake into a Brooklyn community garden with the flat of her sandal. A black woman, 28, who cleared 240 tires out of an empty lot and put her signature on line 9 of the license. That afternoon, a city inspector asked to speak to whoever was in charge. Caroline walked to the shed and brought back a frame with her own name inside it. They call Min-jae the Quiet One. A koi fish climbs the left side of his neck in black-gray ink. He never raises his voice. He never has to. For 7 years he hunted a woman in hiding. New name, new country. He built a search around a ghost. She never left. She never changed her name. She was licensed, listed, and standing in the sun the whole time. That night he found the garden. He got as far as the trellis, and then he stopped, because the boy was blowing out 6 candles, and the 7th one wasn't lit yet. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Caroline Hayes hammered the last tent stake into the dirt with the flat of her sandal because someone had walked off with the mallet again. The stake went in crooked. She pulled it, turned it, drove it again. The canopy over the long table stopped swaying. Behind her, 40 feet of Brooklyn community garden ran green and loud toward the back fence. Tomato rows staked in cages, a bean trellis heavy with vine, a wooden lattice at the far end so thick with morning glory you couldn't see the slats anymore. Caroline, Loretta Boyd's voice came from the shed. The ice is melting into the cupcakes. Move the cupcakes. Move them where? Shade, Loretta, under the trellis. Loretta's wooden bangles clacked as she hauled the tray. The beaded chain of her reading glasses swung against her chest. She had been swearing at the ice for 10 minutes and had not put down a single thing. The garden was Caroline's, not the way people meant when they said a thing was yours, legally. On paper, in a filing cabinet at the borough office, with her signature on line 9. She had cleared it herself. 240 tires out of that lot the first summer, hauled to the curb 4 at a time, and Loretta counting them out loud from a lawn chair because her knee was bad and her mouth was not. Caroline pulled the hose to the bean trellis, opened the spigot a quarter turn, and left it running low while she counted chairs. 19. She needed 22. Loretta, the stacking chairs. They're in my trunk. Then they're in your trunk. They're heavy, Caroline. They were heavy when you put them in. Loretta went for her keys, muttering something about a woman who buys a cake and hires nobody. She checked her watch. 2 hours until the guests came. 22 children on the list, most of them from the school on Vernon, plus the mothers who would stay, and the 2 fathers who always stood by the gate with their arms crossed and left early. Daniel was crouched at the edge of the tomato rows, straightening his paper crown for the 4th time since noon. It keeps falling, he said. Because you keep touching it. It falls when I don't touch it too. Caroline crossed to him, knelt, and pinched the crown's paper tab tighter into its slot. The wax print of her dress pulled at the knee. Burnt orange and gold, the same cloth as his shirt, cut from the same 3 yards she'd bought in March. She'd sewn his over 4 nights after he was asleep. There, she said, now leave it alone. He looked at her with those eyes, steady, unblinking. 7 years, and she had still not gotten used to being looked at like that by a child. Mom, can I go get something? Get what? Something from my room. After the balloons. He never argued. He nodded once and went back to his tomatoes, and Caroline stood and brushed her palms on her hip and told herself, again, that this was a normal child being normal. Mom? Daniel. How old were you when you got the garden? 22. He worked that out against his fingers, quietly, and put his hand back in the dirt. She waited for the second question. There was always a second question with him, and it was never the one you were braced for. The second question stayed where it was. He picked a green tomato off the vine, looked at it, and put it in his pocket. Loretta came back without the tray. Where are the cupcakes? On the crate. Caroline, there's a woman at the gate. Caroline turned. Patricia Voss stood at the chain-link gate with a clipboard against her ribs and a lanyard swinging. Beige municipal windbreaker over gray. Reading glasses pushed up into an ash-blonde bob that ended exactly at her jaw, the way a ruler ends. She had already opened the gate. She had not waited. Good afternoon, Patricia said, walking in. We're closed for a private event. This is public land. It's a licensed lot. Caroline wiped her hands. The license is in the shed. Patricia's pen was already moving. She walked past Caroline and down the row, tapping the pen against her clipboard once per bed, counting. Tent, she said. Open flame? No flame. Candles are aflame. Candles on a cake, Patricia wrote. Loretta stepped up beside Caroline and said nothing, which for Loretta was a statement. Amplified sound? A speaker. Watts? Caroline looked at her. It's a birthday party. Watts? I don't know the Watts. The pen moved again. Patricia reached the end of the row, turned, and looked at the tent, the tables, the 22 paper plates fanned out like a hand of cards, the cupcakes sweating on the crate. Her mouth did something small. Who set all this up? I did. I mean, who's responsible for the site? I am. Patricia looked at her. The sandals, the dirt on the hem, the sweat at the temple, where the center part of Caroline's hair lay flat and black and gleaming. I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge, she said. The garden kept making noise, a sprinkler 2 lots over, a siren somewhere on Vernon. Loretta's bangles went completely still. Caroline held the pause 4 full seconds. Okay, she said. She walked to the shed at the speed of a woman with nothing to hurry for. Behind her, she heard Patricia say something to Loretta about liability, and heard Loretta answer nothing at all, which was worse. Inside the shed, it smelled like bone meal and hot plastic. The frame hung above the seed drawers, dusty, crooked, the way it had hung for 6 years. Caroline lifted it off the nail and blew across the glass, and carried it back out into the sun with both hands. She held it up at Patricia's eye level. That's the license, she said. Patricia looked at it the way people look at a menu. Then she stopped looking at it that way. Certificate of Occupancy and Cultivation, Lot 14, Vernon Street. Issued to Hayes, Caroline. Line 9, Caroline said. That's the signature. Patricia's pen came down to her side. You'll want the tent permit too, Caroline said. It's the second frame, and the food handler card, which is Loretta's, and the insurance rider, which renewed in April, and the sound variance, which I did not apply for, because I did not know the Watts. Loretta made a sound into her fist. Patricia flipped a page on the clipboard and clicked her pen back out, because retreat was not in the training. Site contact form, she said. I need 2 names. There's 1 name. The form takes 2, primary and secondary. Then the form is going to be disappointed. A spouse, a co-signer, a relative. 1 name. Ma'am, if you're incapacitated on site, write Loretta Boyd. Patricia's pen hovered over the second line, where the little gray print said, Second Guardian/Responsible Party. She looked up, and for 1 second she wasn't being municipal, she was being nosy. And the boy's father? The sprinkler 2 lots over changed direction. Caroline felt the sun on the back of her neck and heard Loretta stop folding. Write Loretta Boyd, she said again. Patricia wrote Loretta Boyd. Ma'am, you asked who's in charge. Caroline set the frame down on the table, glass up, facing Patricia. You've been looking at her for 11 minutes. Patricia's chin went sideways. It's a routine inspection. Then inspect. There's no need to take a tone. I gave you a name. You wanted a man's. That landed. Patricia's pale green eyes flicked to the tent, to the children's plates, to the gate, calculating the distance to it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You said it in 4 words and you said them in front of my son. Daniel was standing at the end of the tomato row. Nobody had noticed him get there. He held a steak in one hand, like a person waiting to be told where to put it. He was watching Patricia's face with absolute attention. Patricia saw him. Something in her posture changed, not softened, adjusted. The tent has to be 12 feet off the property line, she said. It's 14. I'll measure. Please do. Patricia measured. She walked the tape out from the fence herself, on her knees in her khakis, in the dirt, while 40 feet away, Loretta Boyd folded napkins with great and terrible slowness. The tape read 14 feet 2 inches. Patricia wrote it down anyway. She stood, brushed her knees, and clipped the pen to the board. Everything appears to be in order, she said. It always was. Patricia walked to the gate. She got one hand on it and then turned back, because people like Patricia always turn back. You should get the sound variance, she said. Someone could complain. Someone did, Caroline said. That's why you're here. The gate rattled shut behind her. Loretta let out a breath that had been building since the windbreaker came through the fence. 14 feet 2 inches, she said, on her knees. Don't? I'm going to think about it for a year. Caroline picked the frame up off the table. The glass had a new smear of her thumbprint across the C in Caroline. She rubbed it clean with the hem of her dress and carried it back to the shed and hung it on its nail and stood in the dark for a second with her hand still on the frame. 6 years on that nail. Nobody had ever asked to see it. That was the part. She came out into the light and her hands were steady, which she checked, because they had not always been. Balloons, she said. Loretta handed her the pump. You want to talk about the second line on that form? No. I'm on it now, legally. You've been on it for 7 years. The city just found out. Loretta laughed once, and then didn't, and pumped a balloon until it squealed. He asked me last week, she said. Caroline's hand stopped on the pump. Asked you what? Whether I ever met his father. What did you say? I said, ask your mother. And he said, thank you, Miss Loretta, and went and washed the mixing bowl. Loretta tied off the balloon. 7 years old, and he cleans up after a question. Caroline took the balloon out of her hand and tied it to the fence and swallowed the thing that came up her throat. Balloons, she said again. 20 minutes later, the fence was a wall of orange and gold, and Loretta was on a crate, tying the last cluster to the trellis, and Caroline had the cake box open on the table, checking the frosting for melt. 6 candles were in the box. She had counted them twice at the store. Where's the 7th? Loretta called down. There isn't one yet. Caroline. He was born at 12:04 in the morning. Caroline closed the box. He turned 7 at midnight, not at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The child does not care about 12:04. I care. Loretta climbed down off the crate, and the crate wobbled, and she grabbed the trellis and morning glory came off in her fist. She looked at the vine, then at Caroline, and decided against saying whatever the next thing was. Fine, she said. 6 now, 1 at midnight. 1 at midnight. You're going to keep 22 children here until midnight? I'm going to keep one. Daniel was gone from the tomato row. Caroline noticed it the way you notice a sound stopping. She turned a full circle. Shed, tent, bean trellis, back fence, the crate where the cupcakes sweated under their tray. Loretta, where's Daniel? He was right. Loretta turned too. He was right there. The gate was open 6 inches. Caroline was at the fence in 4 strides. She got her hand on the chain link and looked down Vernon. He was halfway to the corner. Paper crown, Ankara shirt, grass-stained sneakers, walking with his back straight the way he always walked. Not running, not hiding, both hands in front of him holding something the size of a book. Daniel. He kept going, past the shuttered laundromat, past the hydrant, to the blue mailbox on the corner of Vernon and 9th. Caroline was moving now. Loretta said her name behind her and got the back of her head for it. The boy stopped at the mailbox. It came up past his chest. He had to go on his toes. He pulled the handle down with both hands, and the mouth of it swung open, and he stood there for a second. Caroline was 40 feet away, and she saw it, saw him stop, saw the crown tip forward and stay tipped, and then he put the envelope in and let the handle go, and the mouth clanged shut. He turned around and saw his mother running toward him and wore the face of a boy who had finished a chore. Caroline stopped 6 feet from him because her legs stopped. The last time she had run on this sidewalk, she had been carrying him inside her. Daniel! She had his shoulders. What did I say about the gate? Not to go through it alone. And I went through it alone. He said it like a weather report. Caroline crouched, and the sandal strap bit her heel, and she made herself breathe once before speaking. What was that? A letter. To who? A friend. What friend? Daniel looked at the mailbox, then at her. Those eyes, steady, unblinking, nothing behind them at all that she could reach. From school, he said. Caroline held it. 3 seconds. 4. A bus went by and pulled the paper crown sideways with its wind, and Daniel put his hand up and straightened it without looking away from her. Which one? You don't know him. Did you use a stamp? 2, he said it with a little pride. It was heavy. Heavy how? What was in it? A picture. Caroline's thumb pressed into his shoulder and she made it stop. A picture of what? Of me. Behind them, the laundromat's gate rattled in the wind. Down the block, Loretta had come as far as the hydrant and had the sense to stay there. Who took it? Miss Loretta, at the table, with the cake. When? Yesterday. She had watched Loretta take that picture. She had been 3 feet outside the frame, holding the box lid up so the frosting wouldn't smear. Her son had stood behind 6 candles and looked into the lens with his father's eyes, and she had said, "Smile, baby," and he had. Where did you get the stamps? Your drawer. Which drawer? Daniel looked at the mailbox again. The one in your closet, he said. She heard herself say, okay, because there were 22 children coming, and a cake in a box, and a woman with a clipboard who might still be in the neighborhood, and because in 7 years her son had never once lied to her about anything, and she had no shelf to put this on. Okay, she said again, and stood, and took his hand. They walked back. His palm was hot and small and completely calm in hers. Mom, is Edward coming tonight? Edward's coming. Good. At the gate he stopped and looked back down Vernon at the blue box on the corner. One long look, the way a person checks a door they've already locked. Then he went in and asked Loretta if he could hang a balloon. Caroline stood at the open gate a moment longer. The mailbox sat there in the afternoon glare with its little painted eagle, exactly as harmless as it had been that morning. She latched the gate behind her and hooked the padlock through, and clicked it shut. At 5:40, a truck stopped at the corner of Vernon and Ninth. A man in gray shorts got out, unlocked the blue box, tipped everything inside it into a canvas sack, and drove off toward the sorting facility on Nostrand. Caroline heard the engine over the children's noise and didn't turn around. Kang Min-jae signed the last page without reading it and slid the folder across the desk. The man across from him took it with both hands and left the room walking backward. That was the fourth folder since 7 o'clock. The fifth was already open in front of him, and he had stopped seeing the numbers on it 20 minutes ago. The office took up the top floor of a building on Fulton Street, with no name on the door. One lamp. The rest of the light came off the river. At 9:40, Seo Do-yoon came in with the evening mail and set it at the corner of the desk, squared to the edge, the way he had set it every night for 6 years. 9 pieces. Min-jae kept his pen moving. Anything? Bank! Bank! The Jersey people again. Burn the Jersey people. Do-yoon didn't leave. He tapped the bottom of the stack twice with one gloved finger. Min-jae looked up. The envelope at the bottom was the size of a paperback and thick in the middle, the way an envelope is thick when something stiff is inside it. 2 stamps. Not 1, 2, pressed on crooked, the second one overlapping the first at the corner. The address was printed in pencil, capital letters, each letter drawn slowly enough that the graphite had gone silver where the hand had pushed too hard. There was no name on it, only the company's name, and the floor, and the street. Who brought it up? It came with the rest. Min-jae set the pen down. He looked at the pencil letters for 4 seconds. Then he picked the envelope up by one corner and held it, and the weight of it was nothing, and his thumb went across the stamps. "Scan it," Do-yoon said. "No." "Sir." "No." Do-yoon stood where he was. He had watched this man take a phone call about his own brother without changing his breathing. He had never watched him hold anything by the corner. Min-jae opened the desk drawer. The letter opener had been his father's, and he had used it maybe 6 times in 9 years. He worked the blade under the flap and pushed it along the fold, and the paper made a sound like a small animal walking on paper, and then it was open. He tipped it. A photograph slid out onto the blotter face down. The back of it was white. In the middle of the white, in pencil, in the same capital letters, one line, "He turns 7 tomorrow." Min-jae read it. He read it again. He put 2 fingers on the edge of the photograph and did not turn it over. The river light moved on the ceiling. "Sir." Min-jae turned it over. A boy at a table. A cake in front of him with 6 candles in it, unlit. Paper crown, crooked, one hand still up near the crown, as if he had just straightened it, and the shutter had caught him before he finished. Shirt in burnt orange and gold, a pattern of squares and leaves. Grass on his sneakers. Someone's forearm at the very edge of the frame, brown, holding the lid of a cake box, cropped at the wrist. And the eyes. Min-jae's hand came off the photograph. It went to the edge of the desk and stayed there, and the steel watch on his wrist ticked against the wood twice before he pressed his palm flat to stop it. He had seen those eyes in every mirror he had ever walked past. He had seen them on his father and on his father's father in the one photograph that survived the fire in Busan. Dark, flat lids, open, the stare that doesn't move when the room moves. The boy in the picture was looking directly into the lens the way a man looks at another man across a table. Do-yoon took one step forward and stopped himself. "Do you want?" "Don't talk." Min-jae picked the photograph up. His thumb and forefinger were steady on the edges, and then they were not. The photograph shook. It shook enough that the 6 candles blurred, and he set it down flat and put both hands on either side of it and left them there. 7 years he had run a room full of men who did what he said before he finished saying it. He put his hands on a desk to keep them from being seen. Do-yoon. Sir. What day is tomorrow? The 19th. Min-jae's jaw moved once. He had a date in his head. He had carried it the way other men carry a coin. 6 weeks. She had been 6 weeks along the last time he stood in a doorway and told her what she was going to do, and watched her decide something behind her face without saying a word. He had counted the months forward that first year, in cars, in meetings, on airplanes. Then he had stopped counting, because counting was a thing you did when you expected to find someone. The arithmetic landed anyway. It landed all at once, the way a floor lands. Get the postmark. Do-yoon came around the desk. He picked up the envelope with 2 gloved fingers and held it under the lamp and turned it. Brooklyn. Yesterday's date. Processed at Nostrand. Nostrand. Nostrand, Do-yoon said again, and something in his voice changed on the second one, because Nostrand was a 22-minute drive from the chair Min-jae was sitting in, and both of them knew it. Min-jae stood. He crossed to the window. The river was down there doing what it did. 7 years, he said. Do-yoon said nothing. How many countries? Sir, how many? 11. How much? Do-yoon looked at the folder on the desk. 400,000, not counting the Manila people. Min-jae had bought a name in Lisbon. He had bought a customs list in Toronto, twice, from a man who then sold it to someone else. He had sent Do-yoon to a village outside Cebu in a rented van because a photograph of a black woman with long straight hair at a market had come across a desk, and for 11 hours he had let himself believe it. He had looked in every place a frightened woman goes when a man like him is behind her. He had never once looked 4 kilometers away. Bring me the machine. Do-yoon set the laptop on the desk and opened it and stepped back and put his hands behind him. Sit down, Min-jae said. You type faster. Do-yoon sat in the boss's chair because he was told to. He didn't touch the armrests. What do I look for? Her name. Which one? Min-jae turned from the window. Her name, he said. The one on her birth certificate. Do-yoon typed it. He hit the key. The screen filled. He scrolled. He stopped scrolling. He scrolled back up, slowly, and his shoulders came forward 2 inches, and Do-yoon was a man who had been shot in the hip and had not moved his shoulders. Sir. Min-jae came around the desk. How long did that take you? He said. Do-yoon looked at the clock in the corner of the screen. 9 seconds. The first result was a city page. A public registry of cultivation licenses. Lot 14, Vernon Street, Brooklyn. Certificate of occupancy and cultivation. Active, renewed every year for 6 years without a lapse. Issued to Hayes, Caroline. Under it, a business filing. Under that, a listing on a non-profit index with a phone number. Under that, a photograph. Do-yoon clicked it before he understood what he was doing. She was standing in a row of tomato plants with her hand on the top of a stake, chin up, looking into the camera the same way the boy did. Print dress. Nose hoop catching the sun. Behind her, a wooden trellis with vines all over it, and a shed, and 20 or so folding chairs stacked against the fence. The caption said, "The garden had served 400 families that year." The photograph had been on that page for 2 years and 2 months. Min-jae put one hand on the back of the chair. He looked at the screen for a long time, and the only thing that moved on him was the muscle at the corner of the jaw. Passports, he said. Do-yoon typed, waited, typed again. Nothing. No exits, no entries. He kept going. No name change filed. No marriage filed. Not in this state. Not in any of them. Addresses. 2. 1 for 6 years. Do-yoon's finger stopped over the trackpad. Sir, she's on the school registry. The public one. Parent contact. Say it. Hayes, Caroline, Hayes, Daniel. The name went into the room and stayed there. Min-jae took his hand off the chair. Daniel, he said. He said it once, flat, the way you say a word in a language you are learning to make sure the shape of it is right in your mouth. Then, he didn't say it again. Do-yoon kept his eyes on the screen because there was nowhere else in the room to put them. The distance, Min-jae said. From here. From here. Do-yoon typed. He read it. He read it a second time, and then he said it anyway, because the man had asked. 4 kilometers. The lamp buzzed. Say it in miles. 2.5. Min-jae walked to the window and stopped in front of it and looked down at the street, at the cars, at the bridge, at the strip of Brooklyn lying there under the light, with everything he owned sitting on top of it. 2.5 miles. He had driven through that neighborhood. He had, at some point, in some car, gone down Vernon Street with his phone in his hand and a man's voice in his ear, telling him about Lisbon. She never hid, he said. Do-yoon said nothing, correctly. She never hid, and I couldn't find her. He came back to the desk. He picked up the photograph again, and this time his hands did what he told them. The boy's ears were hers, the mouth was hers, the small nose was hers, the skin one shade lighter than the forearm at the edge of the frame. Everything on that face was hers except the 2 things looking out of it. 6 candles, in a photograph mailed the day before the 7th birthday. He counted. Min-jae said. Sir? The candles. Do-yoon leaned in. He counted them. He straightened. Who took the picture? Min-jae said. Not the mother. Do-yoon pointed at the forearm at the edge, the hand on the cake box lid. That's the mother. She's outside the frame. Someone else was holding the camera. Then who mailed it? Do-yoon opened his mouth and closed it. Min-jae set the photograph down and put one finger on it and turned it a quarter turn, as if it were a card in a game he had just realized he was in. Whoever mailed it wrote tomorrow, he said. Not the date, tomorrow. So they knew it would take a day. Or they didn't think about it at all. Min-jae's finger stayed on the photograph. It's pencil. Do-yoon looked at the pencil letters again, at the way the crossbar of the E ran past the upright, at how the line dipped at the end because the writer's arm had gotten tired. Sir, if this is a play, if someone in the organization is using the boy to reach you, then they'd have asked for something. Min-jae picked up the envelope, turned it over, held it upside down and shook it. Nothing came out. There's nothing in it. No number, no account, no demand. He dropped it. Nobody sends a man a photograph of his son with nothing to sign. Do-yoon went quiet. Min-jae stood in the middle of his own office and looked at a desk with 4 folders on it that were worth more money than the neighborhood in the photograph, and he did not touch any of them. Pull the garden, he said. Everything public, nothing else. You don't call anyone. You don't send anyone. You don't put a hand on that street. Do-yoon's fingers moved. Community garden, lot 14, registered nonprofit, co-founded, there's a second name. Read it. Boyd, Loretta, 52, food handler certificate under her, insurance rider renewed in April. Do-yoon scrolled. Events calendar. It's public too, sir. Anyone could. What's on it? Do-yoon stopped. Do-yoon. Tonight, he said. Private booking, 6 p.m. to midnight. He turned the screen a half-inch, as if that helped. Birthday, 22 children. Min-jae looked at the clock on the wall, 9:58. Something happened in his face that Do-yoon had never seen and would spend the rest of his life failing to describe. Nothing did. Nothing moved. And that was the thing. He'll be there now, Min-jae said. Sir, it's a garden full of children and mothers. If you walk in there, I know what I am. That's not what I... It's exactly what you said. Min Jae's voice never came up. It came down. Say the rest of it. Do-yoon stood up out of the chair and put himself at the corner of the desk with his hands at his sides. You don't know who's with her, he said. You don't know who she told. 7 years is long enough for her to have built anything. A husband, lawyers, anything. Yes. And if you go tonight, you go with no information. Yes. Then wait until morning. Let me get you the full. He turns 7 at midnight, Min Jae said. Do-yoon closed his mouth. I don't know what hour, Min Jae said. I wasn't told the hour. I wasn't in the building. He picked up the photograph and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, over the ribs, and pressed the flat of his hand against it once through the fabric. There's a day in that boy's life where he's 6. It ends tonight. The lamp buzzed. On the desk, the 5th folder was still open at the page he'd stopped reading, and somewhere below on Fulton, a truck went past with its gate rattling. Min Jae took the black overcoat off the hook and laid it over his forearm. Sir, Do-yoon said, what do I tell the Jersey people? That I'm not coming. They've been waiting since. Then they've been waiting. He crossed the room. At the door, he stopped with his hand on the frame, and for a second, the whole floor was quiet enough to hear the elevator cables working somewhere in the wall. Do-yoon, sir, 7 years. I've had 30 men looking for a woman who ran. He turned his head. The lamp caught the side of his neck, and the ink there went from black to gray and back. She never ran. She signed her own name to a piece of paper and hung it on a wall 2.5 miles from this desk, and every single one of us walked past it, because none of us could imagine a woman who wasn't afraid of me. Do-yoon looked at the floor. Bring the car around, Min Jae said. Park it 3 streets away. 3 streets, sir? 3 streets, and you stay in it. He went out. The door didn't slam. It clicked, the way doors do when a man closes them properly on his way to do something that cannot be undone. Do-yoon stood alone in the office with a laptop open to a photograph of a woman in a row of tomatoes, and a burned-out lamp buzzing, and 4 folders worth $11 million nobody was going to sign tonight. He looked at the clock. 10:01. In a garden on Vernon Street, 123 minutes from midnight, a boy in a paper crown was carrying folding chairs 2 at a time because his mother had said he could, and every 4 minutes he stopped and looked at the gate. The chain-link fence ran the length of Vernon Street, and Kang Min-jae walked its whole length twice before he touched it. The first pass, he kept to the far sidewalk, coat folded over his forearm, moving at the speed of a man going somewhere else. He counted exits out of habit. Gate, padlocked, shed door on the north side, a gap in the fence behind the compost bins where the wire had been cut and bent back and then wired shut again by someone who cared about the wire. The second pass, he crossed the street. Music came over the fence first, then the noise of children, which he had no measurement for. He had spent 9 years in rooms where noise meant something had gone wrong. Here it meant nothing had. He stopped at the corner of the lot, where a lilac grew through the links, and he looked into a garden he had already seen on a laptop screen 40 minutes earlier. The photograph in the city's public index had been taken from the gate. He knew the angle. He knew where the shed was before he saw it, knew the folding chairs, knew the wooden lattice at the back with the vines eating it. He had studied that image the way he studied a floor plan, and the studying had been a kind of lie he told himself in the car, that he was preparing. He had not prepared for the sound. A boy was laughing somewhere in the middle of it. Min Jae could not tell which one. That was the first thing that took the strength out of his hands. He walked to the gap behind the compost bins. The wire had been twisted by fingers, not pliers. He untwisted it with 2 turns, stepped through, and twisted it back the way he found it. Then he was inside, standing in 6 feet of dark between the bins and the lattice, and the party was 30 feet away with its back to him. The lattice was older than the vines. Morning glory had gone up it and over it and through it, until the slats underneath were a rumor. Somebody had propped a crate of cupcakes in its shade earlier. The paper cups had gone soft in the heat, and nobody had noticed. Min-jae put his hand flat against the leaves and they gave, and behind them the wood held. He set his shoulder to it and looked through. 20 feet. String lights over folding tables. A boy in a paper crown, standing on a chair with his arms out, while 2 girls argued about whether the arms counted. Min-jae's whole body went still in the way it went still before violence, except there was nothing here to do with it. The boy was small. That was the thing nobody puts in a file. Small and straight-backed, and he kept touching the crown to make sure it hadn't moved. He wore a shirt in burnt orange and gold, the same cloth as the photograph that was in the inside pocket of the jacket right now, against the ribs, and the boy in front of him was the photograph with the sound turned on. The boy turned his head to answer someone. Min-jae saw the eyes. He had seen them 9 seconds after Do-yoon typed the name, on the back of a mailroom table, in a picture that had crossed a city to find him. Seeing them move was not the same. Seeing them move was his grandfather looking out of a face made of somebody else. The boy looked at whoever was talking and he did not blink, and Min-jae understood, standing in the dirt behind a compost bin, that the woman he'd spent 7 years hunting had been raising his father's stare in a vegetable lot 2.5 miles from his desk. He took 1 step forward. The leaves shifted with his shoulder and made a sound, and his foot stopped like it had hit a wall. He looked down at it. 30 men across 11 countries, 4 folders and $11 million left unsigned on a desk. He had walked into a room in Incheon once, with 6 people in it who wanted him dead, and he had walked out of it slower than he walked in, on purpose, so they would remember the pace. His foot would not go. He stood there and made himself name the reason, which was a discipline he'd learned young. Whatever you can't name is what beats you. The reason was that the moment he stepped out of the leaves, the boy would look up, and then the thing on the boy's face would happen, and Min-jae had no idea what it would be, and for the first time in 9 years, he was going to be told something about himself by someone who owed him nothing. He stepped back into the dark instead. Then Caroline came out of the shed, and every man in Min-jae's history became irrelevant. She had a tray in both hands and a roll of tape between her teeth. She put the tray down without looking, took the tape out of her mouth, and pointed with it, and a woman in a purple head wrap moved. She pointed again, and 2 mothers moved. She said something, and a girl who had been climbing the shed door got down from the shed door and did not argue about it. He watched her for 90 seconds and did not learn one new thing about her, and that was what wrecked him. She was the same, not softened by 7 years, not hardened. The same woman who had stood in a doorway at 6 weeks pregnant and told him what she was doing, while he explained why it was impossible. She had gone out of that door and built this, and hung her own name on the wall of that shed, and stood in the middle of it giving orders in a lot full of tomatoes, and every single day of those 7 years, his people had been showing him photographs of women in Cebu. She never ran. He simply could not picture a version of her that wasn't running from him. That was his blindness, and it had cost him a son's entire life. And it had cost $400,000, and the cheapness of the second number next to the first made his jaw lock. Then the man came out of the shed behind her. Min-jae registered him in pieces, professionally, before he registered him at all. White, 40s, lean, glasses, navy blazer, no tie, leather satchel on the shoulder, indoors, at a child's party, still on the shoulder. The strap had worn a shine into the blazer, a man who did not put that bag down anywhere. The man carried a second tray out and set it beside Caroline's, and she said something to him, without turning her head, the way you talk to someone whose position you already know. Min-jae's hand closed on a fistful of morning glory. The man laughed. Then he crouched and picked up a fallen cup from the grass, and he did it without being asked, and that detail went into Min-jae like a nail. He had ordered a man's fingers broken over less than the ease in that crouch. The boy came running, and the man put a hand out, and the boy slapped it, some routine of theirs, worn smooth by repetition. It took half a second. Then the boy was gone into the crowd of children, and the man straightened up and went back to Caroline, and she handed him the tape without looking at him again. Min-jae stood behind the lattice and did the arithmetic he had come here refusing to do. 7 years. A woman like that. He had watched 22 children eat cake off her tables. Of course there was a man. Do-yoon had said it in the office, standing by the door with the laptop still open. You don't know who's with her. A husband, lawyers, anything. And Min-jae had walked past him with his coat over his arm like the words were weather. There was no marriage on record. He knew that. He had made Do-yoon check it twice, and he understood, watching the man take the tape from her hand, that a piece of paper had never been what he was checking for. He made himself catalog it. Boyfriend. 6 months. A year. Long enough that the boy had a routine with him. Long enough that he knew where the cups went. Something moved through his chest that had a name he refused to give it. He had a phone in his pocket. 3 streets away, a car with a man in it who could have the whole story of that blazer inside of an hour. Where he lived, who he owed, what he'd done at 23 that he'd rather nobody knew. His thumb found the edge of the phone through the wool. He held it there. Then he took his hand out of his pocket empty, because of what she'd said in the doorway 7 years ago, which he had not thought about in daylight since. You don't love anything, you just find out where it lives. He put his hand back on the lattice instead. The lights came on properly then. Someone had rigged a timer, and the whole lot went gold at once, and the children made a noise like the sky had done it. The woman in the head wrap came out of the shed carrying the cake with both arms. Everything in Min-jae aimed at that box. Caroline stopped what she was doing. She walked over, opened the lid, and looked inside for a second longer than a woman checking frosting. Then she closed it, and put her hand flat on the top of the box, and left it there. She said something to the woman. The woman said something back, shorter. Caroline shook her head once. She held up one finger. Then she pointed at the sky, or at the dark above the string lights, and Min-jae watched her point, and could not hear a word of it. The woman in the wrap threw both hands up and walked away and came back, which was apparently an argument they had already had and were now having with their shoulders. They set the cake on the center table. They lit the candles. He counted them. 6. Min-jae leaned into the lattice until a slat pressed a line into his cheekbone, and he counted them again, because he was a man who did not accept a number the first time. 6 candles. The boy climbed onto a chair. The whole garden started singing, badly, the way people do, and the boy waited with his hands on the back of the chair, and his crown crooked, and his face doing something Min-jae would have paid every dollar he had to be able to read. Caroline stood behind the boy with her hands not touching him. The man with the satchel stood a step back from both of them, and he sang too, and he was terrible at it. The song ended. The boy filled his cheeks and blew. 6 candles went out. 22 children screamed. The boy stayed on the chair. He turned his head and looked at his mother, and he asked her something, and Min-jae saw her mouth move. The boy looked at the cake. 6 wicks smoking. He didn't ask again. She leaned down and said something else, and touched the crown, straightened it, and the boy nodded. A small nod, a business nod, the nod of someone accepting terms, and got off the chair and was swallowed by the other children. Min-jae stood in the leaves with his heart going like a fist on a door. He turns 7 at midnight. He had said it in his office 2 hours ago, to Do-yoon, standing at the door. He had said it as a fact he owned, and now he had watched the boy blow out 6 candles for a 7th birthday, and there was only one arrangement of the world in which that made sense. She had never lied about the hour, not to a room of 22 children, not for convenience, not to make an evening easier for herself. The boy had been born at some minute past midnight, and she had bought exactly the right number of candles for the exact minute he had lived, and she was going to keep one child awake in a vegetable lot in Brooklyn until the clock agreed with the truth. He didn't know the minute. He had not been in the building. Min-jae looked down at his own wrist. Steel watch, left arm, 17 minutes past 10. He did the subtraction, and the subtraction was the last free act of his life. 103 minutes. He was not going to walk out of these leaves. He understood that now, with complete clarity, standing in the dirt in a $9,000 suit with a photograph over his ribs. He was going to stand here, in the dark, behind a wall of morning glory, and watch a party he was not invited to, and wait for a clock to move. The man with the satchel put a hand on Caroline's shoulder. Briefly, the way you touch someone to say, "I'll get it," and went toward the gate to deal with a parent who was leaving. Min-jae watched the hand and felt the leaves creak under his grip. He made himself let go. He wiped the sap on the inside of his coat. Behind him, through the fence, the street was empty. 3 blocks north, a black sedan sat with its engine off, and a man in it who had been told to stay. If Min-jae walked out now, he would be in that car in 4 minutes and in Manhattan in 20, and no one in this garden would ever know that the most feared man in Seoul had stood 20 feet away and lost his nerve behind a vegetable trellis. The boy came back through the crowd holding a paper plate in 2 hands, carrying it flat and level like it mattered. He set it down on the corner of the table. He straightened the crown, then he stopped, and he looked at the gate. He looked at it for 4 full seconds, the way a man checks a door he expects something to come through. Nobody came through. The boy picked up his fork. Min-jae stopped breathing, because he had watched a child check a door, and a child who checks a door is waiting for someone, and there was only one person in the world who had been told, in pencil, in block letters, that a boy turned 7 tomorrow. Caroline called something across the garden. The boy answered. Everything kept moving. Min-jae put his back against the lattice and slid down until he was sitting on the dirt behind the cupcake crate, in the dark, with his coat across his knees, out of sight of every person he had ever wanted. 10:21. He took the photograph out of his jacket, and he sat there in a garden he had entered through a hole in a fence, and he looked at the 6 candles in the picture, and then up through the leaves at the 6 wicks still smoking on the table. And for the first time in his adult life, Kang Min-jae had absolutely nothing to negotiate with. The paper plate came down on the corner of the table with more force than a boy uses for cake, and Daniel walked away from the noise. He went at a diagonal, the way children go when they have decided something and want no one to ask, past the folding chairs, past 2 girls arguing about a balloon animal. He held the crown on his head with one hand the whole way, not straightening it now, just holding it down, and he crossed 30 feet of trampled grass without looking at a single face. Min-jae heard him before he saw him, sneakers in dirt, small ones. The boy came around the tomato rows and stopped at the crate of cupcakes, and for 1 second the whole shape of Min-jae's life narrowed to the fact that his son was walking toward the leaves he was sitting behind. Daniel sat down on the crate, 2 feet of wood and a curtain of morning glory between them. Min-jae did not move his hand off his knee. 6 inches of vine. He could hear the boy breathe. The breathing came wrong. In through the nose, held, released in pieces. A boy trying to do it quietly and failing at the 3rd one. Min Jae had spent 9 years in rooms where he could tell a man's next decision by his exhale, and he sat in the dirt and listened to his son cry 4 feet away, and understood that this was the first thing about the child he had learned by ear. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his wrist, then with the shoulder of his shirt, the burnt orange one, 4 nights of his mother's hands. "Baby." Caroline came fast and quiet. Min Jae saw her sandals stop in the gap between the crate and the trellis leg, and then her whole body went down. Not a crouch, a kneel, both knees in the dirt of her own garden, in a dress she had sewn to match his shirt, and she put herself below the boy's eyeline so he'd have to look down to find her. "Hey, look at me." Daniel looked at the ground. She waited. She was very good at waiting. Min Jae had learned that at a door once. "Is it the girls?" "No." "Did somebody take your plate?" "No." She reached up and touched the crown, and Daniel jerked his head away, the first time all night, and Min Jae felt it through the leaves like a shot fired in another room. Caroline dropped her hand into her lap and left it there. "Okay," she said. Behind them, 22 children screamed about something. The string lights hummed. Loretta's voice went up over everything, telling somebody the cupcakes were in the shade and would stay in the shade. "Everybody's over there," Daniel said. "They can wait. It's my party." "It's your party," she agreed. "So you get to be back here if you want to be back here." The boy scrubbed his face again. When he finally looked at her, Min Jae could see the shape of his head through a break in the vines, the crown crooked, and he could hear it in the boy's throat before the words came, the way a child steadies himself to say the sentence he has been carrying for a week. "Why aren't there any pictures?" Caroline's shoulders didn't move. "Pictures of what, baby?" "Of him." Min Jae's hand closed on the trellis slat. The wood was old and it gave a fraction, and he made himself let go, finger by finger, and put the hand flat in the dirt instead. Caroline said nothing for 4 seconds. Min Jae counted them. "Of your father," she said. Not a question. She said the word out loud in her own garden, at a normal volume, the way you say a word you have practiced saying. "There's pictures of everybody." Daniel's voice climbed and broke and came back down. "There's Loretta on the wall, there's the tire day, there's you when you were 22 with the shovel, there's a picture of the man who fixed the fence, and I don't even know his name." "Tommy." "There's a picture of Tommy," the boy said, "and there isn't one picture of him, not one. I looked." "When did you look?" "I look all the time." Caroline sat back on her heels. Min Jae stopped breathing through his mouth because his mouth had gone open and the sound of it was too loud. "There's a shoebox in your closet," Daniel said. "I never opened it. I want you to know I never opened it. I know it's there." "I know you know." "I didn't open it." "I believe you." The boy pulled the green tomato out of his pocket and turned it over in his fingers and put it back. Something a child does with his hands when the rest of him is trying to hold still. "Everybody at school has one," he said. "Marcus's dad is in Georgia. Marcus has a picture of him on the refrigerator, and Marcus sees him at Christmas. Priya's dad died. She has a picture of him at the beach, and she brought it in for the shoebox thing in October, and Miss Lang let her stand up the whole time." "I remember the shoebox thing." "I didn't bring anything." Daniel's chin came up. "I said I forgot. I didn't forget." Caroline's hands were still in her lap, the milky white nails on the Ankara print, not moving. "What do you think happened to him?" she said. The question sat there. Min Jae, 4 feet away in the dark, in a $9,000 suit, in dirt, waited on the answer of a boy who was 6 for another 90 minutes. "Everybody says he's dead," Daniel said. "Who's everybody?" "Marcus." Loretta's face. "Miss Lang." He said it flat. "A list. Nobody says it. Everybody says it." "Did I ever say it?" Daniel went quiet. Caroline waited again. And this time, the waiting had teeth in it. "No," the boy said slowly, "you never said it." "No. You never said anything." "That's right. That's worse," Daniel said, and his voice went up into the part of it that was still 6 years old, and he put both fists on his knees. "That's worse, Mama, because if he was dead, I would know. I would know one thing. I don't know one thing." Min-jae put his hand over his own mouth. He had given an order in Incheon, standing in a room with 6 people who wanted him dead, and his voice had not changed. He put his palm over his mouth in a vegetable lot in Brooklyn and held it there. Caroline reached out and took her son's fists and opened them and put his hands flat in hers, one at a time, like she was putting tools back where they went. "Okay," she said. "Ask me." Daniel stared at her. "Ask me," she said again. "Right now, you've been walking around this all week. You asked Loretta. Loretta told you to come to me, and you didn't come to me for 8 days. Ask me. You'll get the face." "What face?" "The one where you go somewhere," Daniel said. Caroline's jaw moved once. Min-jae saw the exact place where the boy's fist had landed on her and admired, for a second that shamed him, how she took it standing. "I won't go anywhere," she said. "Ask." Daniel looked at the leaves. He looked directly at the trellis, at the wall of morning glory, at a spot approximately 6 inches to the left of his father's face, and Min-jae's whole body went to stone in the dirt, and then the boy's eyes went past it, up, to nothing, the way children look at nothing when they are choosing words. "Is he alive?" "Yes." The word came out of Caroline immediately, no breath in front of it, no arrangement. Min-jae's hand slid off his mouth. Daniel sat on the crate and did not move at all for 3 full seconds. Then his shoulders came up around his ears and stayed there. "Yes? Yes. Now? Right now, he's—" "As far as I know, your father is alive right now," Caroline said. "I have never said otherwise to you. Not one time in 7 years. You can go back through every single thing I ever said to you, and you will not find it. I let people think what they wanted. I never taught it to you. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you didn't ask." "That's not fair." "It's not," she said. "It's not fair. That's the honest answer, and it's not fair, and I'm not going to dress it up for you tonight." The boy was crying openly now, no attempt at the quiet version. "You could have told me at any time. Any day, any. You could have told me last week when I asked Loretta. She told you I asked. I know she told you. She tells you everything. She told me. And you didn't say anything." "I bought a cake," Caroline said. Daniel stopped. "I bought a cake, and I counted the candles wrong on purpose," she said. "And I have been standing in that shed for 8 days, deciding whether tonight was the night. And I hadn't decided, baby. I'm going to be honest with you, because you're old enough to hear it. I hadn't decided. You decided for me." Min-jae, behind the leaves, closed his eyes. Footsteps came up the row. Loretta, wooden bangles knocking, a stack of napkins in one hand. Caroline lifted 2 fingers off her thigh without turning around. The footsteps stopped. Then went away. Min-jae watched that happen and thought about the 30 men he paid to read a room, and how not one of them could do with a hand what that woman had just done with 2 fingers, and her back turned. "Where is he?" Daniel said. "I don't know." "You're lying." "I'm not." "You know everything." "Not that." "Then what do you know?" The boy's voice cracked all the way open. "Tell me something. Tell me one thing about him. Anything. Tell me if he's tall." Caroline took a breath. "He's tall," she said. Daniel's mouth came apart. "He's tall," she said, again, quieter. He's very quiet. He doesn't raise his voice, ever. I never heard him raise his voice one time." She said it the way you read off a form. "He has a scar through his eyebrow. His hands are steady. He has your eyes. I have his eyes. You have his eyes, Caroline said, and I have never once been able to look at you straight on in the morning without knowing it. Daniel's hand went up to his own face. He touched under his eye with 2 fingers, the way you touch a bruise. Is that why? He said. Is what why? Is that why the shed light stays on? He said. When you think I'm asleep. Caroline's head came back an inch. You come out here at night, Daniel said. I watched from the window. You stand in there and you don't do anything. There's nothing in there to do. There's plenty in there to do. You don't do it. She looked at her son for a long time. How many nights? She said. A lot. How many, Daniel? I stopped counting when it got to be normal, the boy said. Min-jae pressed the heel of his hand into the dirt until the grit went under his nails. 7 years, 11 countries, $400,000. A man in Lisbon who sold him a name, a van outside Cebu, a woman he had built in his head out of fear and could not find because she had never once been what he built. And the truth had been sitting in a shed in Brooklyn with the light on, being watched from a bedroom window by a boy who thought it was normal. Is that why you never? And he stopped, because there was no end of the sentence a 6-year-old had, and Min-jae, in the dark, finished it for him, and hated the shape of it. No, Caroline said. No, look at me, Daniel, look at me. He looked. There is not one single second of you that I ever wished was different. Not one. Do you hear me? Then why don't I have him? And Caroline Hayes, kneeling in her own dirt, in the only garden in that borough with her name hanging on a nail in the shed, told the truth in a voice pitched for exactly one person. Because when you were a bean, she said, I stood in a doorway and I looked at your father, and I understood that the man was going to be able to buy you. Daniel blinked. I don't know what that means. I know you don't. Buy me with what? With everything, she said. With whatever a 6-year-old wants. With more of it than you can imagine. He would have put the whole world on a table in front of you and asked you to pick, and you would have picked, baby, because you were 5, because you were 3, because you were 6 last week, you'd have picked, and you'd never have known you'd picked, and by the time you were old enough to look at him and decide for yourself, there wouldn't have been anything left of you that hadn't already been bought. The boy was still. So I waited, Caroline said. I waited for you to be old enough to look at the man and not the money. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's the only reason. I didn't hide him from you because I hate him. I never taught you to hate him. Not one word, not one time, have I? No, Daniel whispered. Say it back to me. You never said anything bad about him. No, and I never will. Her hands tightened around his. You want to be angry at me for that? Be angry. You're allowed. You can be angry at me tonight, tomorrow, when you're 20. I'll take it. I'd do it again. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. How old is old enough? He said. Caroline's mouth moved and nothing came out of it. Min-jae opened his eyes. 7? Daniel said. She didn't answer. Mama, is it 7? I don't know, Caroline said. I honest to God don't know. I've been telling myself a number my whole life and every year the number moves. Daniel wiped his nose on his wrist. Behind them, somewhere near the shed, a child shrieked with laughter, and someone dropped something plastic, and Loretta hollered about the ice. You want to know what I wished for? The boy said. Caroline went very still. On the candles, Daniel said. You didn't ask. Everybody else asked. Loretta asked twice. You didn't ask. You're not supposed to tell. I'm telling. She let go of his hands, and she put her palms on her thighs, in her lap, and she straightened her back the way she does when a woman with a clipboard walks through her gate. Okay, Caroline said. Tell me. Daniel adjusted the paper crown. Once. Precisely. And then he said it in a voice that was not loud at all. And 4 feet away, through 6 inches of morning glory, his father heard every word of it. I didn't wish for a bike, Daniel said. I don't want the bike. You can take the bike back. Baby, I wished to know who he is. The boy's chin was shaking and he kept talking through it. That's it. That's the whole wish. Not to live with him. Not to have him come here. I'm not stupid. I know he's not coming here. Caroline reached for him, and he leaned back an inch, and she stopped. I just wanted to look at him one time, Daniel said, and ask why I wasn't important enough to make him change. The garden went on making noise. Caroline Hayes knelt in front of her son with her mouth open and nothing in it. And behind the trellis, in the dirt, in the dark, the most feared man in Seoul sat with a photograph of a cake in his fist and heard his son price him, accurately, at 6 years and 364 days old, and the leaves in front of his face moved because his shoulders had started to shake, and Daniel Hayes turned his head toward the sound. The leaves opened before he decided to open them. Min Jae came up out of the morning glory, the way a man comes up out of water, one hand on a slat, the coat sliding off his knees into the dirt, and he stood in the string lights with soil on his palms and a photograph crushed in his fist. He had walked into a room in Incheon with 6 people in it who wanted him dead. He had never once stood up like this, badly, without a plan, half a second before he was ready. The garden stopped. Not all at once. It stopped in rings. The girl nearest the trellis stopped first, a fork in the air, then the mother's. Then the music kept playing over the top of it, tinny and cheerful, singing about a summer somebody else was having. Loretta moved before anyone else in the lot understood there was something to move for. She crossed 9 feet of grass and put her body between the tall stranger and the children, arms out wide, palms flat, the way you stop traffic. 52 years old, 5'5", wooden bangles sliding down to her elbows. She did the arithmetic in one glance: height, shoulders, the suit, the coat in the dirt, and planted her feet anyway. Back up, she said. Min Jae did not hear her. He was looking at the crate. Caroline came up off her knees. She did not turn to see who it was. She stood, and while she was standing, she was already moving, and by the time she was moving, she was already in front of her son with her back to him and her right arm reaching behind her to find him, and only then did she look at the man's face. 7 years fell through her chest like a dropped plate. Get out, she said. Her voice did not rise. That was the thing that scared the 2 mothers by the shed more than anything else that night. How flat it came out, how rehearsed, like a sentence she had been keeping in a drawer, folded, in case. Caroline, don't say my name in this garden. Get out. Caroline, you came through the fence. She had seen the dirt on his shins. The gate's padlocked and you're standing in my beans, so you came through the wire behind the compost bins, which means you knew you weren't invited, which means you already know the answer, so I'll say it once. Get out. Somebody's phone lit up. Loretta turned her head 6 inches and said, "Put that down, Renee," and the light went out. Min Jae raised his hands, not high, chest level, palms open, the photograph still in the right one, and everyone in the lot saw the paper, and nobody in the lot knew what it was. "I'm not going to touch anyone," he said. "I know you're not." Caroline's arm was still behind her, fingers spread against her son's shirt. "You never touch anyone. That's what the other 30 are for." Behind her, Daniel took 1 step to the side. She felt it happen against her hand, the Ankara cotton sliding out from under her fingers, and she grabbed for him and got nothing but air, because he had not run and he had not hidden. He had just moved 8 inches to the left so that the line of sight between his face and the man's face was clear. 6 years and 364 days old. He looked up. The garden had 22 children in it, and every one of them was watching the wrong thing. They were watching the stranger's suit. Caroline was watching her son's face, and she saw it arrive there. Not fear, not joy. Recognition. The specific, quiet, unhurried recognition of a boy who has looked at those eyes every single morning of his life, in a bathroom mirror, over a sink he needs a stool to reach. Daniel touched under his own eye with 2 fingers, same as he had done 4 minutes ago in the dirt, and he stayed where he was. That was the part Min Jae would take out and look at for the rest of his life. Not the eyes, the stillness. He had prepared, in the 6 feet of dark behind the bins, in the 4 minutes he had spent not breathing, for a boy running at him. He had braced his weight for it. He had decided where his hands would go. The boy adjusted his paper crown and did not move 1 inch toward him. "You're him," Daniel said. "Daniel." Caroline turned, and her hand came down on her son's shoulder. Look at me, baby." "He's tall," Daniel said to his mother, and his voice did the worst possible thing. It stayed reasonable. "You said he was tall, and the eyebrow. You said the eyebrow." He looked back at the man. "It's right there." Min Jae's jaw moved. Nothing came out of it. "Loretta," Caroline said, "take the kids to the shed." "Caroline, now." "All of them. Renee, Tanya, the shed, the back door. There's soda in the blue cooler." Loretta was already turning children by the shoulders like a woman turning tomato cages, and the lot began to drain toward the north wall in a shuffle of sneakers and dropped forks. One girl cried. Another asked if the man was in a movie. 22 children went through the shed door in 90 seconds. Daniel did not go with them. Caroline saw the space open behind her son and understood that she could pick him up. He was 44 pounds. She could put him over her shoulder and carry him to the shed in 11 steps and lock the door, and it would be over, and he would be 7 years old at 4 minutes past midnight, and he would hate her at 20 for exactly that, precisely and forever, and he would be right. She let go of his shoulder. "Stay behind me," she said. "Okay," he said, and stayed exactly where he was, which was beside her, not behind her, and she let that go too. Then Edward came out of the shed. He came fast, blazer open, satchel banging his hip, and he put himself at Caroline's right shoulder and stopped there, and Min Jae saw the whole thing land in one frame, the man, the position, the hand that went to the small of her back and then, at the last second, didn't. Something ugly went through Min Jae's chest, and he let it, because it was easier than what was underneath it. "Caroline," Edward said, "do you want him removed, or do you want him here?" "Removed by who?" Min Jae said. It was the first thing he had said above a murmur, and it came out low and even, and it made Loretta, at the shed door, put her hand on the frame. "You?" "By the 88th precinct," Edward said. 10 minutes, give or take, on a Saturday. Edward. Caroline didn't look at him. "Not yet." "Edward," Min Jae repeated. He tasted it. He had spent 1 hour and 50 minutes tonight building a man out of a blazer and a shoulder bag, and the way a boy slapped his hand. He had built a boyfriend. 6 months to a year, long enough for the kid to have a routine with him. 7 years, Min Jae said to Caroline. "And this." Caroline's chin came up. "Say the rest of it," she said. "You know the rest of it." "No. Say it." In front of him, she pointed at her son without breaking her eyes off Min Jae's. "He's been lied to by silence his whole life, and he says that's worse. And he's right, so say it out loud so he hears exactly who you are." Min Jae's hand closed. The photograph creased. "I thought he was your..." He stopped. "Say it." "I thought you replaced me." Quiet. Absolutely audible. "I stood in those leaves for 2 hours, and I watched him hand you tape, and I decided what he was, and I put a number on it. 6 months. A year." His throat worked. "That's what I am." "Yes," Caroline said. "That's what you are." Edward reached across his body, slowly, the way you move when a man like that is 9 feet away, and he opened the flap of the satchel he had carried on his shoulder for 6 hours at a child's birthday party. "Mr. Kang," he said, "my name is Edward Callahan. I'm an attorney. I've been Ms. Hayes's attorney for 7 years and 1 month. The garden had a hose dripping somewhere. That was the only sound. I drafted the order of protection," Edward said. "Kings County, ex parte, granted the same week she came into my office. She was 6 weeks pregnant. She sat in the chair with her coat on, because she hadn't decided yet if she was staying. He took out a folder. He did not open it. You were served at an address on Fulton Street. You never contested it. It ran 3 years and she let it lapse, and she wouldn't renew it, and I asked her every year for 4 years, and every year she said the same thing." Min-jae was looking at the bag he had catalogued, the bag whose strap had worn a shine into the blazer, the bag he had watched all night with his thumb on his phone through the wool of his coat, deciding not to spend an hour of Do-yoon's time finding out what was in it. "What did she say?" Min-jae said. "That paper never stopped you from anything," Edward said, "and that, if you ever found her, a piece of paper on a judge's desk would just tell you which door." Min-jae's shoulders came down 1/2 an inch. It was the closest thing to a flinch that anyone in that lot would ever see out of him. He had priced this man at a boyfriend. This man had been standing between him and his son since before his son had a spine. "Loretta," Caroline said, "go get the box." Loretta didn't move. "Caroline, baby. The shoebox. 2nd shelf. Behind the winter coats. My keys under the hose reel." Caroline's voice didn't change at all. "He's going to hear all of it tonight, and then he's never going to say a word about any of it again. There's 22 kids in that shed. Renee's got the kids. Go." Loretta went. The gate chain rattled. Her flat shoes crossed Vernon Street and the front door of the house on the far side of the lot, the house with the window Daniel watched the shed light from, opened and closed. "You don't need to do this in front of him," Min-jae said. "Don't." Caroline stepped forward. 1 step. The first one she had taken toward him in 7 years. "Don't you stand in my garden with dirt on your shoes and tell me what my son can hear. You had 7 years to have an opinion, and you spent them somewhere else. I spent them looking for you." "I know exactly what you spent." She stopped 4 feet from him. "How much?" He didn't answer. "How much?" Min-jae. 400,000, he said. 11 countries, 30 men. 30 men. Caroline nodded slowly, and not one of them typed my name. The photograph came apart a little in his fist. I was 19 weeks in a Bed-Stuy clinic waiting room, with a number in my hand, she said. 61. They called 61 at 4:10. There was a woman next to me who kept apologizing for her son kicking my chair, and I told her it was fine, and then I went in, and they put the wand on me, and I asked them not to tell me what it was, because I hadn't decided yet whether I was going to be able to keep it away from you, and I didn't want to know a person I might have to lose. Min-jae's mouth opened. 29 weeks I got the bleed, she said. I walked to Woodhull, 11 blocks. Loretta was in Charlotte burying her mother, so I walked, and I sat in triage for 5 hours, with my hand on my stomach doing math about you, not about him, about you, about whether the hospital would put my name in a system, whether a system was a door, whether the man who finds out where things live could find out where I lived from a triage sheet at 2 in the morning. Caroline, they asked me for the father's name. She said it like she was reading it off a wall. There's a line. It's got a box. I sat there with the pen, and I thought about your face, and I wrote unknown, and I was 21 years old, and I lied on a hospital form in a paper gown, so my son would get to be a person instead of an address. Daniel had gone very still beside her. He came at 4 minutes past midnight, she said. There was nobody in the room. That's your answer, by the way, since you spent tonight trying to figure out the number. 12:04. Nobody held my hand, and nobody took a picture, and a nurse named Denise said he's got his daddy's eyes, because that's what they say, and I laughed. Min Jae. I laughed out loud in that room with him on my chest, because it was the only true thing anybody said to me for a year. The gate chain rattled again. Loretta came back across the grass with a shoebox held flat on both palms, the way you carry a cake. She stopped beside Caroline, and she stood there holding it, and she looked at Min Jae like she'd looked at the tires. "Open it," Caroline said. Loretta lifted the lid. Envelopes. Not a few. The box was full to the corners, standing on end, packed tight, cream and gray, and one heavy black one at the front, and every single one of them had been slit open along the top with something sharp. Min Jae's hand came up. "She read them," Loretta said. "Every one. First one in the bathroom of a laundromat, because she didn't want the boy to see her face when she did it. 41, Caroline said. 9 of them registered. 3 came with men standing on my step, waiting for a reply." She took the black one out and held it up, and she did not open it, because she did not need to. "Come home," she said. "Page 1, that's an order. Second page, a number, an account, a routing line, like I owed you an invoice." She dropped it back in the box. "Third one from the top says the child will be raised properly." Properly. Not one letter says the word sorry, Min Jae. 41 letters, 9 lawyers, 3 men on my step. Not one sentence in 7 years that ever said, "I was wrong." And I read every page hunting for it like a fool, in a bathroom, with the door locked, and I want you to know that I would have read it. If it had been in there, even once, even badly, I would have read it. The box shook in Loretta's hands. Loretta steadied it. "You wrote to a wife," Caroline said. "You never once wrote to a woman who left." Min Jae looked at the box, then at Edward's folder, then, finally, at the 70-year-old shed with the certificate hanging in it on a nail. "I couldn't find you," he said. And Caroline Hayes stepped in close enough that the string lights caught the terracotta of her sandals in the dirt, and she said it in the voice she used for the child, calm and level and slow enough to bury. "You lost 7 years looking for a son who was never hidden. You only failed to find him because you were still the same man I needed to protect him from." The music ran out. The playlist ended and the speaker clicked over into nothing, and in the silence that came down over Lot 14, Kang Min Jae, 32 years old, 9 years at the top of an organization that had never seen him raise his voice, set his hand on the corner of the folding table to hold himself up, and his son watched him do it. "Who mailed it?" Min Jae said. His voice had gone to gravel. He opened his fist. The photograph was ruined, soft along the crease, 6 candles and a paper crown, and a brown forearm, cut off at the wrist. "Somebody put this in a mailbox," he said. Somebody wrote, "He turns 7 tomorrow," on the back of it in pencil. Caroline turned her head. She turned it toward Edward Callahan, and her mouth opened to say a name. And beside her, without a sound, her son raised his hand. Caroline saw the hand out of the corner of her eye, and turned her head the wrong way twice before she understood what she was looking at. Her son had raised his arm the way he raised it in Miss Lang's classroom, straight up, elbow locked, waiting to be called on. "Baby, put your hand down." He kept it up. Min Jae looked at the boy, then at the crushed photograph in his own palm, then at the boy again. "I mailed it," Daniel said. Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Edward's folder came down against his thigh. Loretta's arms tightened around the shoebox until the cardboard bowed. Caroline crouched. Not the Neil from the tomato rose. Something faster, uglier. One knee straight down into the dirt beside him. "You said it was a friend from school." "I know. You've never lied to me." "I did tonight," he said. "One time." She reached for his shoulders, and stopped an inch short, because he had turned his face toward the man in the ruined suit and was not looking at her at all. 2 stamps, Daniel said. I got them from your drawer. Min Jae's voice came out low and cracked at the edges. How did you know where to send it? The boy straightened his crown. Your name is on the invitation. Caroline's hand dropped into the dirt. She heard the sentence and could not place it anywhere, the way she had not been able to place the envelope on the sidewalk, and this time, there was no shelf anywhere in the world. What invitation? The one in the box under the shoebox, Daniel said. The white one, in the back of the closet, behind the coats. You said you never opened it. I never opened the shoebox, he said. You asked me about the shoebox. Loretta made a sound like she'd been elbowed. Min Jae took 1 step and stopped himself, because Caroline's head came around, and even wrecked. Even kneeling, she had a look that put a wall up in front of a man who had walked into a room in Incheon and walked out slower on purpose. 6 months ago, Daniel said. In the winter, you were at the garden with the pipes. The freeze, Caroline said. February. I was looking for the tape measure. He said it plainly, no apology in it. He had gone looking for a tape measure, the way a boy does, and he had found a flat white box under the winter coats, and inside the box, a card with gold letters that had gone brown at the fold, and on the card 2 names, and one of them was his mother's. The other one was long, Daniel said. It had 3 parts. Min Jae's jaw moved. He said nothing. Kang Min Jae, the boy said. I said it out loud in my room to see if it did anything. Caroline put her hand over her mouth and took it away again, because her son was still talking and she was not going to miss any of it. I typed it at the library, Daniel said. Miss Ruiz lets you have 40 minutes. Edward closed his eyes. There's a company, Daniel said. It has a floor and a street. It doesn't have a picture. Everything else in the world has a picture, and it doesn't have one. Min Jae's shoulders came down an inch. 9 years of paying men to keep his face off a screen, and the emptiness where his face should have been, was the thing his son had noticed first. So I waited, Daniel said. You waited 6 months, Caroline said. I wanted it to be my birthday. Why? The boy thought about it, then he said, because if I sent it in February, he could say he was busy. Min Jae's hand found the corner of the folding table again. The photograph slid out of his fingers onto the paper cloth, face up, 6 candles burning in it under a string of lights that had gone on by a timer 40 minutes before the man arrived. I didn't write my name, Daniel said. I didn't write please. I wrote 1 sentence. He turns 7 tomorrow, Min Jae said. Yeah. Why that sentence? Because it's the only thing that's true no matter what you do, the boy said. Caroline sat back onto her heel in the dirt. Her son had run an experiment on a man with 30 men, and he had built it so the man could not pass it by accident. I wanted to see if you'd come by yourself, Daniel said. Nobody could make you. Mom didn't know. Loretta didn't know. If you came, you came. Min Jae looked at him. I came. You hid. The word landed and stayed there. You came, and then you got in the plants, Daniel said. For a long time. Yes. How long? Min Jae did the arithmetic he had been doing all night. 2 hours. Daniel nodded once. The business nod, the one from the chair, the one that meant terms were being accepted, and nothing else. That's still by yourself, he said. Caroline made a noise into her fist. But I'm not going to say it was good, Daniel said. No. Okay. Then the boy did the thing nobody in the lot had planned for. He turned to his mother and said, You can be mad at me tomorrow. I'm not mad. You're something, he said. Yeah. Her voice broke on the one word, and she let it. I'm something. Loretta shifted the shoebox to one hip and put her free hand flat on the back of Caroline's head for a second, and took it away. "There's another part," Daniel said. Caroline lifted her chin. "Say it." He looked at the two of them, at the 4 feet of dirt between his mother and the man with his eyes, and he set his jaw exactly the way she did. "I don't want you to get married." Edward's head came up. "Daniel, Marcus's mom and dad got married again," the boy said. "He told everybody. Then in April he cried in the coat closet, and Miss Lang had to sit in there. That's not— I know it's not the same." He straightened the crown. "I don't want a wedding. I don't want a house. I didn't send it for that." Min Jae's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. "I sent it for me," Daniel said. Caroline started laughing. It came out wrong, wet and torn, and she pressed the heel of her hand under her eye and let it happen, because her son had spent 6 months protecting himself from her rescue and from his father's money at the same time, and he had done it alone, at the library, with 40 minutes at a time. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay." Min Jae crouched. It took him a long moment, and he did it slowly, the way a man lowers himself when his legs are not certain, and he ended up at the height of a boy in a paper crown and a shirt cut from the same 3 yards as his mother's dress. They looked at each other. Nobody translated. Nobody stood between them. Caroline stayed on her knee in the dirt 8 feet away, with her hands open and empty, and did not close the distance, and it cost her more than the 7 years had. "You asked something earlier," Min Jae said. "I heard it. You were listening." "Yes. That's not the same as me telling you." "No." "Then I'll say it to your face," Daniel said. "Why wasn't I important enough to make you change?" The music was gone. 22 children were behind a shed door 40 feet north, with a blue cooler and a mother named Renee. There was nothing in lot 14 but the timer lights and the question. "You were," Min Jae said. "That's a lie." "It's not a lie." His hands hung between his knees. "It's worse." Daniel waited. "I looked for you for 7 years, Min Jae said. I never once thought about being different. I only thought about finding." The boy took that in. He touched the tomato in his pocket through the fabric. "Then you weren't looking for me," he said. Min Jae's head went down. Not far. An inch, maybe 2, and the koi tail moved under his collar, and he stayed there. Loretta looked at her phone. She said, quietly, "Caroline?" "What?" "It's 11:59. Caroline got up out of the dirt. She did not run. She walked to the center table, and her hands were steady when she opened the white box, and she took out the 7th candle and pushed it into the frosting, a half-inch from the 6 black wicks. Loretta came with the lighter. Nobody sang. "Come here, baby," Caroline said. Daniel walked over and stood at the table. Min Jae stayed down on one knee in the dirt where the boy had left him. 12:04, Caroline said. "You know the deal." "I know the deal." They waited 4 minutes. 4 minutes is longer than anyone thinks. Loretta held the lighter and didn't spark it. Edward stood with his folder against his leg and looked at the fence. Somewhere north, a car with the engine off held a man who had been given no orders in 3 hours and would not move without them. At 12:04, Loretta snapped the wheel and lit the candle, and it burned by itself in the middle of 6 dead wicks, one small flame on a supermarket cake in a vegetable lot in Brooklyn. 7, Caroline said. Daniel looked at it. He didn't close his eyes. He didn't wish. He blew it out. Then he turned around, and for the first time in his life he looked at his father across nothing at all. No leaves, no mother's shoulder, no lawyer, no table. And Min Jae looked back with the same eyes, and neither of them moved toward the other. That was all it was. 2 people finding out the other one existed in the same room. Nobody hugged anybody. Caroline put the lid back on the box. "Edward," she said. "Yes, open the folder." He opened it on the folding table, next to the ruined photograph, and clicked a pen. Caroline turned to Min Jae. He got up off his knee. "Here's how it goes," she said. "Tell me. You don't get to say yes fast. Fast is what you do instead of meaning it." He nodded. Legal agreement. Filed. Kings County, same building. She counted it on her fingers the way she counted chairs. Supervised visits. Here. Not a car. Not a restaurant. Not a floor with your name on the door. This lot. Daylight. How long? Until I say different, and I might never say different. Okay. No gifts over $20. No bike. No trust. No account number. No routing line. Nothing on page 2. If you put money in front of him, I stop it that day. Min Jae's mouth tightened. He's my son. He's 7 years old and 4 minutes, Caroline said. You don't get to buy the part you missed, Edward wrote. And one more. Say it. You never use him to get to me. She said it flat and level, the way she'd said get out. Not a message through him, not a question about me, not a look at me over his head. You want to know how I am? You read it in a filing. The tendon moved in his jaw. And if I say yes to all of it? Caroline looked at him for a long moment. Then you've said words, she said. You've written 41 letters worth of words. Words are free. You've never paid for anything in your life that cost you something you wanted to keep. That was the sentence that did it. Min Jae reached into his jacket. Loretta stepped back. Edward's hand came up, and what he took out was a phone. He looked at it, then he held it out to Caroline. Take it, he said. Why? Because in 1 minute I'm going to want it back. She took it. He turned to Edward Callahan, and he said the strangest sentence a man like him has ever said to a man like that. You're a lawyer. I'm her lawyer. I know, Min Jae said. Who do I call? Edward's glasses caught the string lights. For what? Eastern District, Min Jae said. The office on Cadman Plaza. The night went very quiet. You understand what you're saying? Yes. Say the whole thing. Min Jae looked at the boy standing beside the cake. There are ledgers, he said. 9 years of them. Names, dates, accounts. Jersey, Manila. Everyone who's ever been paid by me and everyone who's ever paid me. He stopped. Seo Do-yoon is in them. He's in them more than anyone. Edward set the pen down. He's your driver. He's been my driver for 6 years, Min Jae said. He's 3 blocks north right now, with the engine off, waiting for me, because I told him to wait. Caroline said nothing. If I hand those over, I'm not a boss anymore. There's nothing left to be the boss of. He looked at his own hands. That's what it costs. That's the only thing I own that costs me something. Edward wrote a name and a number on a legal pad and turned it around. Min Jae looked at Caroline. She held his phone in her fist. Not tonight, she said. Tonight? No. She put the phone on the table, screen down, beside the photograph and the folder. Tonight is his birthday. It's 12:15, and there are 22 kids in my shed. Min Jae stood there. Monday, Caroline said. 9 in the morning. That's 56 hours. If you still want it Monday, you'll want it because you want it, not because you're standing in a garden. He understood the shape of it immediately. She had done to him exactly what his son had done to him, built a thing nobody could make him do, and stepped back to watch whether he'd do it alone. 56 hours, he said. That's the whole offer. He picked up his phone, and he did not call anyone, and he walked out through the gate because Loretta unlocked it, and the black wool coat stayed in the dirt behind the trellis until morning. He was at Cadman Plaza on Monday at 8:40. What came after took the shape those things take. Rooms with bad chairs, men in windbreakers with 3 letters on the back carrying boxes out of a building on Fulton Street that had never had a name on the door. Do-yoon was picked up on a Thursday, on a corner, standing next to a car, and he never said a word about the man who gave them his name, which was in its own way the last loyal thing anyone did in that organization. $11 million in 4 folders went to somebody else. The lawyers took 9 weeks. Edward filed on a Tuesday. Min-jae signed every page of it, including the page about the $20, and he signed it in front of a clerk who had no idea who he was, which was the point. The first supervised afternoon was in June. He came at 2. He wore a shirt with no jacket over it, and he had nothing in his hands, and Caroline pointed at the crate by the trellis and went back to the tomato rows, 40 feet away, where she could see everything and hear nothing. They didn't talk much. Daniel showed him how the drip line worked. Min-jae, who had never grown anything, held the hose. He came the next Saturday, and the one after that. Nobody was impressed, and that was the arrangement. By August, the boy called him something. Not Dad. It took a while, and then it didn't matter what it was. Caroline never went back to the wife. He never asked her to. He asked her exactly one thing, once, standing at the gate in September with his car keys in his fist, how she was, and she looked at him until he heard himself, and he said, "Never mind," and left, and that was the last time. He'd told her once that she was something he could find. 7 years later, on Vernon Street, he learned the other half of it. You don't love anything if all you ever do is find out where it lives. The last one left the garden at 7:15 that evening. Caroline coiled the hose. She hung the sign, checked the gate, and stood a minute in the middle of the lot she had pulled 240 tires out of when she was 22. The lights came on by themselves. Her name was on a nail in the shed, and it had been there the whole time. She smiled, half of one, just for herself, in an empty garden, and turned off the light. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever built something with your own 2 hands, under your own name, and still had someone ask to speak to whoever was in charge? Have you ever protected a child from a truth until they were old enough to carry it without being bought by it? And if a box of old letters from your past were opened in front of everyone, would a single one of them contain a real apology? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, motherhood, and truth, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.